All right, Susan, and you can go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to go ahead then and start sharing my screen and we'll get going. Good morning, everybody. I am happy to welcome you to this session of the 2015 School Leadership Summit. This summit is brought to you by TCAL, which is a California SETS project. It actually focuses on EdTech leadership and provides resources for school administrators that are appropriate not only in California, but around the country and internationally. And in addition, here are some of the other sponsors of today's event. It's really wonderful to have the support of so many different groups from all over the country, and I'd like to thank them very much for helping to make today happen. This particular session is entitled The Case for Hybrid BYOD Initiatives, and I'll now take a moment to introduce myself to all of you. My name is Susan Brooks Young. I spent 23 years in both public and private education. I have been a classroom teacher. I have been a site administrator, assistant principal, and principal in both elementary and middle school levels. I also was a technology integration specialist for a county office of education in California. And I currently am a member of the TCAL Cadre, which is the group that helps make the TCAL project happen, and also am a consultant who now works with schools and school districts, not only all over the United States, but also internationally, addressing a variety of topics that are related to effective use of technology in the classroom. And I am coming to you today from Lopez Island, which is one of the San Juan Islands in Washington State, just south of the Canadian border. So I'm happy to have everyone with me and to share some information with you over the next 20 minutes or so related to hybrid BYOD initiatives. Before we get started, I would like to take just a moment to point out to you that in the chat window, I have added a link that you can click on and access today during the presentation. If you would like, just come to the link that, or use the link that I provided. You'll come to this opening page and then just go ahead and click on the title for this session. It will take you to this online agenda, which consists of a live binder just chock full of resources related to BYOD and hybrid BYOD programs. If we have time at the end of the session, I'll actually give you a quick tour of the live binder so that you're able to see what some of the resources are that are available to you. Also, please feel free to share this resource with your colleagues and with others, and to come back and use the resource whenever it's appropriate for you. It's going to be posted for the foreseeable future, so you'll have easy access to it. During today's session, I'm going to actually address 3 points. I'll be talking with you about how it is we got to the point where people are even talking about something along the lines of hybrid BYOD in classrooms. Then I will give you my definition of what a hybrid BYOD program is and what it looks like from a 30,000-foot level. And then I will go into some of the pros and cons of hybrid programs and things you can do to anticipate potential issues, to capitalize on the strengths of this type of program, to help ensure that if you do decide to take this route, that you will lay the groundwork so that you have the best possible experience for yourselves and your students. I cannot at this point see the chat, but Amy is in here with me and she is monitoring chat questions. And if I say something that you'd like to have expanded upon a little bit, or that you'd like for me to explain a little bit more, please go ahead, add your question in the chat window, and Amy will interrupt me and I'll address the question right on the spot, because I think it's really important, especially in this kind of environment, to have as much back and forth as we possibly can during this time. So do not hesitate to post your questions, and I will cheerfully stop and address them right on the spot. So let's go ahead and get started. Since the first desktop computers were installed in school computer labs, educators have struggled with the best way to improve student access to the technology. Now, when most teachers had limited individual experience using personal computers, labs seemed to be a really good solution. But over time, it became clear that students actually needed to have regular and immediate access to technology if, in fact, it was really going to impact anything they were learning. The logistics of lab scheduling and of having equipment located outside of classrooms made that nearly impossible. And a popular analogy at the time became, we don't have a pencil room. We don't have to get our kids lined up and march them out every time we want them to write something with a pencil. So why are we having to do that when we want them to use technology? So the evolution then of more portable laptop computers offered flexibility in terms of where and how students actually could be using technology. And decreasing prices made it possible for schools and districts to purchase more devices than they had been able to when they were buying desktops. So as early as the 1990s, educational institutions started experimenting with one-to-one initiatives. And those initiatives did have some immediate, readily apparent benefits. Excuse me. This included the fact that one-to-one initiatives support one common platform. They facilitate equipment maintenance and software updates because the school or the district owned the equipment and was able to take care of that. It also offered equal access to all students who were participating in the program, because there was no question about affordability on the student end anyway. And finally, it simplified the monitoring of student use of the equipment that was being provided, which is always a concern because the devices were owned by the district or the school, and it was possible for IT staff to actually look in and see what students were doing with the laptops that were being provided to them. But by the same token, there were also drawbacks to this approach. Many of these concerns were grounded in the need for sustainable funding to keep the initiative going. For example, the initial investment in hardware, software or apps, subscriptions, and site infrastructure are all very high when you are rolling out a one-to-one initiative. And In addition, there are then the ongoing costs of maintenance, repair, hardware replacement, subscriptions, and tools for monitoring, not to mention funding for regularly scheduled opportunities for professional development for staff members. So, given the expense of successfully launching a one-to-one initiative and the number of students who now own mobile devices, many schools and districts are debuting Bring Your Own Device, or BYOD programs, where students are permitted to use personal devices at school. There are several reasons that educators commonly cite for making the decision to adopt BYOD. For example, students express a preference for using their own devices whenever possible, and just about 2/3 of parents who have been surveyed report that they actually are willing to purchase mobile devices for their children to use at school as long as they believe that they actually will have an opportunity to use whatever's been purchased. The result of that is that BYOD programs are less expensive, or can be less expensive, for schools and districts, both initially and on an ongoing basis. Then, as a result, these cost savings enable schools or districts to reallocate limited financial resources toward expenditures for infrastructure or for professional development. And in addition, there are reduced costs for maintenance and equipment replacement, as with BYOD, this actually ends up becoming the parent's responsibility. But BYOD also presents some challenges. In order for it to work, students have to take responsibility for remembering to charge and bring their own devices to school. The potential for distraction during class activities is very high. Teachers have to be able and willing to rework learning activities, to incorporate the use of the devices, and to be engaging for students. And they also need to restructure their classroom management strategies often. In a BYOD environment, you've got to be on your feet, you've got to be thinking ahead of the students, to ensure that they're on task. I'll give you a very quick example of that. I was in a classroom recently where a teacher said to the kids, put all your devices, or no, actually what he said to the kids was, put your internet connected device on your desk, which the kids all dutifully did. But because he didn't say put all of your devices on your desk, at least one student was sitting there. He had his old cracked kind of nasty tablet up on the desk and his nice nifty new smartphone in his lap, and spent the entire time that the teacher was introducing the activity texting. And the teacher was, because he was up at the front of the room, completely oblivious to the fact that at least one of his students was paying absolutely no attention to what was going on. And had he said, put all of your devices on the desk, having seen these kids and worked with them a little bit, I know that that student would have complied and would have done that instead. Some other drawbacks include the fact that even if you define minimum specifications for the devices that students bring, teachers now need to remember that they cannot assume that students will be using one common platform. And there's always the possibility that students won't have a device they can bring to school, which then raises concerns about equity. Policies and procedures need to be updated to address things like privacy and filtering when using personal devices, and also to talk about who assumes financial responsibility if paid apps are required for classroom use. And while initially the costs might be reduced, there are still going to be ongoing costs, such as keeping the infrastructure up to snuff and making sure that teachers have access to appropriate, ongoing, effective professional development.
Susan,
And yes,
I just wanted to read one of the comments here from Valerie. She said that while most students often have a phone, a lot of them don't have a data plan, but the biggest barrier that she's found is that the school's connectivity to Wi-Fi is often problematic.
absolutely. And Valerie, I am going to talk about that in greater depth in a couple of minutes. But since you have brought that up, I want to say clearly to everybody, regardless of the kind of initiative you decide to set up, the thing that will kill it faster than anything else is a wonky infrastructure. If you don't have a good enough network to support having that number of students hitting the network with multiple devices, you are going to have a problem. And we'll come back to that, but thank you very much for bringing that up. And there's another issue that has come up through one-to-one and BYOD programs, and that is the fact that access to just one type of device, regardless of who owns it, is probably not enough. A recent report based on Speak Up survey results states, just as we do not assume that students will only access one book for all classes, the idea of using only one mobile tool to meet all assignment needs may be unrealistic. You may be aware of the 2013 Los Angeles Unified School District rollout of a one-to-one initiative that would eventually have given an iPad to every K-12 student in the district. The project was fraught with problems on a number of levels, but one concern that very quickly rose to the surface was the fact that it turned out that iPads were not at all an effective one-device solution for LAUSD's high school students. So that came up in my own experience in working with schools with one-to-one and BYOD programs verifies this. If in fact instructional needs are driving the selection of technology tools available at a school, students are going to require access to more than one type of device to complete various learning activities. So does that mean that schools or parents need to provide multiple devices for their students? I don't think it does, but it does suggest that this is a really good time to rethink what mobile technology should be available and how that might be accomplished. So now let's look at what a hybrid program is and how that might actually end up helping out. Some schools and districts are implementing hybrid programs where students may bring and use their own devices at school. But in addition to that, the district or the school also provides mobile devices such as tablets and laptops for student use. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that works. The devices that are then owned by the school or the district are available for teacher checkout from a central location, or in some schools, they actually permanently distribute these devices to classrooms. So they may say in a primary setting, every teacher has 6 to 10 tablets of some sort in the classroom. In upper elementary grades, perhaps they have some tablets, and they also have Chromebooks that are available in the classroom all the time. At middle school and at high school, there often is a transition from some kind of tablet and Chromebook to some kind of tablet and laptop, but they don't try to equip them one-to-one at all. And in some settings, they actually have these devices on mobile carts where the teacher doesn't check out the entire cart. The teacher takes maybe on a 30 device cart, the teacher may end up checking out 8 to 10 of those devices so that the carts are able to serve multiple classrooms. The goal isn't to offer one-to-one access to any specific device, but to make it possible for teachers and students to select the appropriate tool for a given task from several readily accessible options. Some of these hybrid programs also include a component that allows students who don't own a personal device to check one out for use at school and at home as well. You may be wondering if it's really necessary for schools to provide technology when students can bring their own. And my experience has shown me that the answer to that is yes. not just for the reasons that I've already given, but because just as one-to-one and BYOD initiatives help create an environment in which one student uses one device for individual work, hybrid programs offer additional access to limited numbers of devices and that naturally encourages students to engage in small group or paired work. This is important because we say that we want students to be engaging in technology-infused activities that support higher order thinking skills as well as 21st century skills such as communication and collaboration. However, unless teachers intentionally design learning modules that require paired and small group work, it's highly likely that students left to their own devices are going to be limited in their ability to pull off this paired and small group work on their own. So now we come to the pros and cons then of hybrid BYOD programs. Some of the concerns that are commonly mentioned are similar to those that are concerned in one-to-one and BYOD programs. Theft and damage comes up almost universally as a top concern. The way that you deal with this is through policies. You have parents sign documents that state that they are responsible for devices that students bring to school, whether it's something to do with damage or theft or whatever, and that the school takes responsibility for the school-owned devices. A number of schools are actually encouraging parents to purchase insurance for the devices, which is not expensive. You can get a policy for as little as $30 a year. And some districts even actually will say, here are some places where you can get these policies. But then they leave it up to the parents. They don't mandate it. But if the parent opts not to buy it and something happens, then they're responsible for taking care of it. The fact that there are multiple platforms is a potential issue, but if you take the time to come up with a list of minimum specifications, you can ameliorate this problem by saying to parents, when you purchase a device for your students, they need to have dual cameras, they need to have some audio recording capability, they need to have Wi-Fi connectivity, and or they need to have a certain amount of memory, whatever it is that you expect for the students to have, so that you can avoid kids bringing in devices that really are not appropriate for classwork. Batteries are another issue. Teachers often worry that kids will bring their devices to school uncharged, and unfortunately that is true. Sometimes they will. Sometimes it's because they're forgetful, and sometimes it's because the electricity has been shut off at home. My take on that personally is it's not a hill that I want to die on. I recommend that you have a power strip in the classroom where kids can plug in and charge if they need to. But again, the beauty of the BYOD program, or hybrid BYOD program, is that because you're not trying to create a one-to-one environment all the time, if somebody's device isn't working because the battery isn't charged, fine. There are plenty of other devices in the room to engage in the activities that you've planned. And then finally, I've talked already a little bit about distractions. But again, this continues to be a worry, and it does require that teachers get the support they need so they understand how to avoid that kind of an issue. Some of the positives of the hybrid BYOD initiatives are that students are using devices that they're already familiar with. It can cut costs significantly so that the school and the district can focus on things like Val mentioned, the infrastructure, because it's going to require way more than most of your IT people are going to project. It really is. And so it's good to have those funds and be able to shift them to another purpose. When you're in a hybrid BYOD environment and you do need to have one platform, for example, you want the kids to make interactive ebooks, well, that works really well with iOS devices. It does, and now there's an Android app that will allow you to do that. But with other devices, it may not work. as well. And so the teacher goes into the room with the assurance that his or her kids are going to be able to accomplish whatever the task is, because there are those school-owned devices that can be used. And again, it does support collaboration, which I think is a really, really important part of education in today's world. There are things that you do need to spend time thinking about as you plan a hybrid BYOD initiative. The very first one is curriculum. You have to be able to discuss how is it that what you are doing is going to support teaching and learning. And if that is not a clear-cut thing, then you need to not be doing this. Okay, if all you're going to do is have the kids use tablets or phones to complete worksheets, you should save yourself a lot of time and a lot of money and just not do it, because that has no impact on student learning. Basic needs. Val, this is for you again. Maslow said that years ago that people needed to have food, clothing, and shelter, and until they did, they weren't going to be focused on much of anything else. Somebody recently suggested that in today's world, 2 additional basic needs are batteries that are charged and Wi-Fi access. If your network is not able to handle the amount of traffic that this is going to generate, then you need to back way off until it can. And there are workarounds for this. For example, teachers can use apps that don't require Wi-Fi connectivity in order to actually operate, and that is one workaround. But and another workaround may be having a pilot where you start off with a smaller number of classes using the network until you can get it beefed up. But without that, I promise you, this is simply not going to work. Other things that you need to devote resources to are professional development, and it does need to be ongoing. It's not enough to send somebody to a conference or to have somebody come in and do a one-day workshop with your teachers. They need coaching. They need to be able to go back to whoever it was that provided the professional development for them to answer questions that arise later on because they didn't know what they didn't know. And that's just really important. It's also important to get your policies and procedures updated. And this is an area that districts often neglect. Another thing that's important is for teachers to have the time to think through what's important to them and what they want to see happen in their classrooms and to establish norms for that. And then finally, IT support. You cannot do this, even if it's even the BYOD part. If you don't have IT support, it's just not going to work. So you really do need to think about how you can make that happen. A hybrid BYOD program requires careful planning. You start with a good team. Not everybody needs to be a tech guru or even convinced that this is going to work, but they need to be willing to consider the possibilities and to devote the time that's required to make good decisions and develop a workable plan. As I said before, start with the curriculum. There has to be a direct, obvious connection to teaching and learning, and if not, you need to rethink whether or not you should be proceeding. Be realistic about the other areas that I mentioned on the previous slide, and even take a look at ISTE's essential conditions for technology implementation to see where your school falls in this. And that actually, I'm going to jump out of this and take you to the binder for just a second. This is the life binder that's linked. If you click on the planning page, there is a link that will take you directly to ISTE's essential conditions, and I'm sitting here now looking at this and I'm not seeing it, so I promise you that when this is over, I'll go back and I'll add it, and I'll add it right in front of Bring Your Own Device Toolkit K-12 Blueprint. I added that other link this morning and I don't know where it went. But while I've got you here, I'll just very quickly say, you can see the tabs across here: planning, policies, procedures, important reports, and then some others that also will be helpful in presenting your hybrid BYOD program. So I'm going to stop sharing at this point, and I believe I've probably already used up all my time. But if there is a question that somebody wants to ask quickly, or if Amy, if you want to chime in with anything, now would be the time.
Sure, and it looks like there is not so many questions as people have been leaving comments for each other, which is great. Valerie also added Digital Wish and Donors Choose are good outlets to either find some equipment at a significantly lower rate or even to have projects funded. So, you know, and I know that those names have come up before, and so that's great. Thank you for sharing those, Valerie. And it looks like some links have been shared, which is awesome. And the recording will be available on YouTube. And so, Susan, if you actually want to share any links with me, I'll be sure to put them in the description of the recording, and that way people will be able to follow up there.
Okay, I would just say go ahead and add the online resources link. And
Perfect.
then folks, binder actually was created by me, by Dan Morris out of Colorado, and Ryan Imbriali out of Maryland. And we frequently do workshops on topics related to BYOD and hybrid BYOD, and we're updating it all the time. So it changes all the time. So keep coming back.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Susan. I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.